Okay, I will call the meeting to order. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me to my immediate left is Brent McIntyre, and to my far left is Ron Stenning. The assessor today is Marina Tenawara, and the recording secretary is Kelsey Harrison. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that the applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So will you do the swearing in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would you like to swear in on the Bible or affirm without? Could you please state your name?
Morina Dantika Tenor.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Swear in?
Yes.
Could you please state your name?
Trevor Smith.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 8 items on the agenda today, but I understand there's 4 items that we can expedite, so can you proceed with the first, which is the first
130 Osborne Street.
130? Okay, good, I've already written that down. So,
I will pass my recommendation
okay, can you first of all read in the,
before the passing recommendation.
yeah, just
Okay, sure.
just read in the roll number. And
Okay, sure. Good morning. This is the property address. Property address is 130 Osborne Street, roll number 1203176410. Property owner 10005035 Manitoba Limited. This property was originally valued $1,322,000. Today I am presenting to recommend the value at $1,114,000. Recommendation based on removal of basements from the premises because the basement units were used by the tenant in the main floor. The rents paid together combined with the basement. You can see my calculation on recommendation.
£1,000.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
all right, and Mr. Smith, how do you feel about this recommendation?
Yes, we're accepting of the value.
The value, okay. And that's all we will take is acceptance of the value. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from the panel on this?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you may as well circulate the
Oh,
recommendation around with the,
this one without a recommendation, but this is the property adjacent to the previous property. That property sold as together. Then I don't make a recommendation for this one.
But we're recommending confirmation of the.
oh, okay. So we'll do that
Assessment
one
for
then.
435 Stratford.
435, okay, the next one we have is 103 Osborne on the agenda.
Right.
But it's not a recommendation or.
Oh, okay,
We
it's
are
not,
need to listen
okay, so you
together.
wanna do
Before-
435 Stradbrook?
Yes, that's.
Okay.
That's,
Okay, so you can proceed with your presentation then?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property address, 435 Stradbrook Avenue, roll number 120317666100. Owner is 1,5035 Manitoba Limited. This property is adjacent to 130 Osborne Street. You can see the picture attached in page number 7. And that 130 Osborne and 435 Stradbrook sold in this to same owner at the same time as a multi-road sale. Today, original value is 2,175,000. I'm kindly asking confirm the value as it is based on the sales evidence presented in page number 2.
Okay. And how do you feel about that?
we are also recommending confirmation of the assessment for this property.
Okay. So then you declining then to present any evidence?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
No, just to, maybe I wasn't listening, so what was there was a recommendation?
No, it was strictly the confirmation of the value
Oh, I see, okay, fair enough, yeah.
based on the sales of the two properties combined. Okay. Next property then,
Okay.
for which?
Chairperson, I'm going to move to next recommendation. This
Next
is-
recommendation.
Yeah, 1271 Jefferson.
Which is item number 5 on your agenda.
I can circulate
Sure.
calculation before.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address 1271 Jefferson Avenue, roll number 050045670000. Property owner 7288124 Manitoba Limited. This property originally valued as 10,777,000. This property was sold in 2016 for 9,950,000 in page number 2. subject leases are presented in the page number 2 as well as. And originally we value this property as using three income calculations: supermarket, restaurant, and neighborhood shopping center. Because we identified this property as a neighborhood shopping center, we are putting the other two income stream, supermarket and restaurant, together with neighborhood shopping center. Now it's only one income stream on this property. That's what my recommendation is for. That's how I calculated my recommendation. Based on the one income stream, value will be reduced to 9,960,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and how do you feel about that?
We are in agreement with market value of 9,960,000.
Okay. Okay, and the next property would be
Vaughan.
That is 251 Warren Street, which is the item 7.
all right.
Say 251 Vaughan?
Yes.
All right, that's good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I am presenting the recommendation. Yes.
Okay, you can see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address 251 Warren Street, roll number 120936888000. Property owner Lakewood Labs Inc. This property originally valued as 1,240,000. If we move to page number 2, this property has a sale in 2018 March 23rd for 1,250,000. Page number 3 shows the original calculation where how we calculate the property value in originally. This property has a basement units. I check all the field form information to check whether it's a mezzanine or basement, because I did not attach it the brief because we don't want to go public evidence. So I have the basement unit field forms, everything, because those are not the mezzanine units or second floor units, because that's why we use the higher rents on there. But I changed it to 08 basement unit. And also I'm not removing these basement units in here. The way they use, the tenants use the basement, they fully use as a staff room and those things, not just the storage. So keep the basement, changing C6 to 08 basement unit, value reduced. And also the other change were made is this property originally classified as a neighborhood shopping center. After reviewing the safe area, this property is not a neighborhood shopping center, this is a retail property. Change the parameters to neighborhood shopping center to retail. The other reason for the recommendation, the cap rate change with the neighborhood shopping center to retail, but all the parameters, model parameters apply for the recommendation. Even though it's lower than the sales price, we are making the property characteristics correct and making a recommendation to 983,000 for 2020 value. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we'll maybe let the fire truck be passed. Okay, how do you feel about the recommendation?
We're in agreement with the market value of 983,000.
Okay. All right, so that, I believe, concludes the items for which agreement has been reached. So, we'll return to 103 Osborne. Which is item 2 on the agenda. Okay, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address 103 Osborne Street. Toll number 1203211300. Owner Desert Limited. Page number 2. There is a property lease information on page number 2. It's only three units lease information there. And also I have put current comparables in page number 2. Those are rental rate from $16 to $24, $30 per square feet. This property, in page number 3, this property we assess as a retail unit, and property has the main floor and the second floor tenants. Our average rent is $13 per square feet we use. If I'm speaking here, we did the oversight error putting 25% vacancy rate in this property. It is originally we make oversight error in original assessment. Today I'm not going to make a recommendation for this property. If I make a recommendation, it is going to be increase of value, but therefore I'm not making any recommendation for this property. If I'm removing this oversight error, I need to adjust the vacancy rate to 10.5% to reflect the 30% of actual vacancy on this property. And also I need to change the effective age in this property because this property originally built in 1906, but we value as a 1975 building. I checked the field forms and information. We can make a corrected in this value, but we have to seek the increase. Then we are not correcting value in this property in this cycle. We are asking to confirm the value as it is. I am going to change all the corrections for the next cycle. It will show up in the next cycle. And you can see the picture of the property in page number 7. It's a map, location map in page number 7. And picture of the property, just the front view in page number 8. And also rent roll attached with the property in my brief. I did not number the rent roll. I'm kindly asking to see the last 2 pages like this. Last 2 pages on rent roll. That means page number 1 and 2. The owner reported total rent as a 1,183,562 total rent, but we are using lower than that total rent. Our total rent is 172,989. And also page number 2 on the owner's page. They are recovering almost everything. Reported total expenses are 109,796. They are recovering all the expenses. And net operating income is $11.87. We are using 105,505 as net operating income, applying the cap rate of 7.9. I checked if I change the effective wage, the cap rate will be changed a little bit. Even if we use the different cap rate to reported net operating income, value will be higher than the 1,336,000. So I'm kindly asking to confirm the value as it is for this 2027. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, the rents in the subject property, the city's aware that they're gross rents.
We aware is a combination of semi-gross and net rents.
Okay. On the rent roll and income statement that's provided at the back of your brief there, it does note on the page that looks like this, the detail regarding the base stop amounts. That's correct?
Pardon me?
So just looking at this page from the income and expense form that was submitted by the owner and included in your brief there, it does indicate that there are base stops for the rents that are charged at that facility, indicating that they are gross rents or semi-gross rents where the tenants only pay operating costs and property taxes if they are above the amounts that are set for the individual years. Is that correct?
But it is clearly said it's intensives and inducements. We are not considering tenant inducement in this for assessment. And because it's a note about the inducement, we don't consider those ones. But if I go to page number 1, in tenant, page number 1 in their page number. Sorry, I did not page number on the income expenses mailer. But we can see they recovered the common area recovery, property tax, and all the other charges. But that's why I'm telling some tenants pay the net rent, some tenants pay the gross rent, semi-gross rent. It's really hard to us to calculate those numbers. But in their income statement, they reported they all recovered as a 109,796. I totally understand about those gross, semi-gross, and net rents, but they recovered almost everything. They pay on the tenants. That's what I focus on. They reported their net operating income as a 116.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, getting back to this page, so these are not tenant inducements that we're talking about here. It's the base year stops for operating costs and property taxes that I was referring to. So it would be line numbers 3 and 4, where it indicates what the base year stops are, above which the tenants do not pay or only above which the tenants pay their proportional share of operating costs and property taxes, so nothing to do with inducements. The vacancy in the building at the subject time and historically has been in the neighborhood of 25% or over, is that correct?
But we are solely focused on this property. But the neighborhood, it could be a range of any number.
Okay, with this building in particular, there are, I believe there are decisions going back with regard to the vacancy where the city has made adjustments upwards in the vacancy, is that correct?
I
To
didn't
reflect
get
the
your
second floor and interior space?
Yeah, then you can see my numbers. It represents the second floor. Second floor applies the lower rents than the upper floor. We represent those ones. This is all model driven rents, but you can see the numbers. It's a range of numbers based on the premises. I'm not talking about the rent, but my solely focus on the oversight error. That's why I'm not making the recommendation.
So you're saying that the 25% vacancy was an error?
It is error.
Okay. With regard to the value change, so the 2018 assessment was reduced from 867,000 to 708,000. For 2020, we're now at 1,336,000. That's an 89% increase in market value.
Yeah, that's what kind of wanted to speak up, because I talked to my manager also before I come to hearing, because that's an oversight error carried forward for many years. Then we are going to inspect this property again and correct it for next cycle. That's what I don't make any recommendation here. If I would, I could make a recommendation. So I'm not kindly asking.
Sure. So the city is certainly welcome to come and see it and see the significant ongoing vacancy and the challenges that they have in leasing it. Those are all of my questions, I guess. So this property wasn't inspected for
For this cycle by myself, no.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stenning, any questions?
No, I'm gonna wait for Mr. Smith. I have no questions of the city.
Okay.
So I have two questions. One is on the master rent roll. There's 4 tenant or 4 spaces listed as vacant.
The last, those ones? Yes, those
One
are
oh-
vacant.
Yeah, 111, 107, B,
Yeah,
C, D.
yeah, those are vacant.
Do you have any idea what the total square footage of that space is?
Vacant space. No, I need to recalculate. I need to recalculate the numbers. No, I have I calculated, actual vacancy is 3,975 square feet,
3,975 square feet?
which is 30% actual vacancy. Then if we use the prorated vacancy chart, it will be 10.5% vacancy.
Okay, and the other question is on this particular page. There's a comment here by the person who completed this, see attached disclaimer, but yet it's not attached, there's nothing attached to it.
Yeah, this, all the income expenses, I only attach the pages with numbers and data. That's the only reason. I remove all of the cover pages and all of the pages with no data. That's the only reason.
Okay.
I only attach numbers. You can see all of my briefs is the same way.
Okay, thanks. That's all for me.
Okay, now you say 25% vacancy is an error.
Yeah, it is the oversight, I consider as the oversight.
Because typically that would be the value we would use if a property was 100% vacant, we would
Yes, that's
value
right.
it at 25%.
Yes.
Okay, now the cap rate, 7.9%. Seems that, I mean, how do you get 7.9 and say not 8? We usually would round to the nearest quarter point.
If I would say this is a model-driven cap rate, this year we use the model parameters. I did not change the cap rate. We are using 7 point all the December months.
Okay, why the change in procedure? It would seem to me that to get that precise with the cap rate, you must have excellent sales to justify that fine a definition of the cap rate.
Yeah, the modelers has all the data for the sales. They analyze these ones. They came up with this cap rate. No, I don't have why it's not 8. I don't have answer for why it's not 8%.
Okay. All right. So you can proceed with your presentation, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. So I will just get you to look at my page number 6 to begin with. So subject property 103 Osborne Street was originally built in 1906, so the structure is of that age and vintage. If you look at the aerial photo that I have of the site and the top of the building there, you can see that there's an interior courtyard that is in, well, towards the center of the building there. Takes out a chunk of space. You can see the tree that's growing inside the courtyard there. So that runs both levels of the building. Get you to flip back to the front now of the cover. So you're looking at the front elevation here. There is main floor retail that is present there, and then you have two levels of space above that. The entryway to this is from a stairwell located on the front of the building. It takes you up, and there is some degree of improved space up there. This space has historically been vacant and available for lease, actively marketed by a number of national commercial brokerage houses, including our own at the present time, to no great degree of success. Now, the reason for this is that it's not space that's in demand. It's certainly not space that tenants are seeking out. Second floor space in the village or indeed in other locations is not in demand. The occupancy of that space in the past was some time ago for much of it, and the improvements are significantly dated and really of no value to modern tenants. Nobody would be moving into that space as is, and in order to draw a tenant there, one would have to spend a significant amount of money in order to get them in and paying rent, and that it simply is uneconomic to do so. You need to find a tenant that would move in as is, and there really aren't out there. The layout with the courtyard is very disruptive and poor. You have significant obsolescence with the design of the building. There's there's the layout that one would get for a unit, if you were to demise off the individual units, would be oddly configured and not desirable by the majority of tenants. The other issue that we face here is parking, obviously, being in Osborne Village. If you look at the site photo again, there's no on-site parking, so you have second floor space. Typically, this is going to be probably office space. Office tenants have employees that need parking. They can't park at Safeway, or Shoppers Drug Mart, or any of those locations. On-street parking is exceptionally limited, so to draw a tenant here is really, really challenging. So the spaces that are vacant, and indeed there are 5 of them, not 4, if you go through the income and expense form at the back, there is 5 spaces that are vacant, and it comes to, let me flip to it here. On my page number 13 at the top, it comes to 3,975 square feet of vacancy, which is 29.3% vacancy. This is not at all unusual for the building. That historically is what the property has sat at. That level or above for vacancy. And again, if you look at the front of the building, you've got main floor retail, fair enough, you're going to draw tenants for that, and then you have poorly accessible, badly laid out, poorly improved second and third floor space that is very difficult to draw tenants to. So yes, you're going to have greater vacancy. So it's not a situation where if you have a building that's 100% vacant, you should allow for 25% vacancy. It's a building that will have 25% vacancy on an ongoing basis. Even if you sell it to a new owner, they're not going to be able to reconfigure this building as such and draw tenants to fill up that space. And as I said, it has gone through a number of national commercial brokerages trying to lease up this space over time with essentially the same result. The main floor leases and the other floors are very difficult to lease out. Moving on from that, we have a couple of photos of the building. I'm not sure why the interiors were not included in the brief. We have inspected the property, and it is as I described. Looking at the income approach. So as mentioned, the property is on a gross, semi-gross basis. There aren't net leases that are in this space. If you look at my page number 10, we've shown you the gross rents that are achieved for each of the individual tenancies, and where the space is vacant, we've assigned a $10 rate for the subject property as what could be realistically achieved for those vacant units. And that again would be your upper level space. So beneath the chart there, you can, again, looking at the chart, we have gross rents in the 21, 23, 17, 16, $12 range. We then reduce that to bring them down to the net rental amounts in the second column, and you get your annual rental value on the right-hand side. So the explanation for this is at the bottom. The way the building is operated is there are base year stops both for operating costs and for property taxes. That meaning the amount of operating costs that are covered by the landlord is set at a certain level, and anything above that the tenant contributes to. So as shown in the income and expense statement, the city's brief and ours at the very back, if you look at that, the base year stops for operating costs were $87,161 for 2017. The actual operating costs came in at $86,881. This means that no operating costs were paid by the tenants. The gross the gross rent encompassed that. So there were no additional costs paid by the tenants there. On property tax, slightly reverse. Base year stop was $15,246, and property taxes were $16,689. So the proportional amount amounts to 11 cents per square foot. So looking at this, we had operating costs of $7.53 a square foot. Deduct 11 cents from this, and you have $7.42 a square foot that you then have to deduct from the gross rent to come down to the net rent, which is how we arrived at our net rent figures. So our net rents are in the $14, $15, and then $10 and $9 range as you go on to the upper floors. So we have assigned rental rates to the vacancies as such. Again, very tough space to lease. Our rental rate comparables are shown on page number 11. Happy to answer questions on them. These are generally retail spaces. It's very difficult to find second and third floor rents in order to compare directly to properties such as this. If you look at the rental rates that we have here, it ranges from $6.50 on the low end, a bunch in the $10 range in arguably better locations, up to the $14 range roughly. So again, looking at the property, bottom of page 11, built in 1906, significantly older property, has the wear commensurate with the building of that age. Second floor, extremely difficult to lease, a lot of functional obsolescence, lowering the demand for the space, as well as the rental rate that one could achieve on that space. Property also suffers from physical obsolescence due to deferred maintenance given the age of the structure. And again, we have the parking issue. Based on those factors, we feel the in-place rates are fair and equitable. And we've applied the $10 rental rate to the vacancies. We've gone through the vacancy issue. We've applied 25% for the reasons that we're saying. Again, it's not a matter of let's follow the model and the building is 100% vacancy, it should have 25% vacancy. This is a building that will have 25% vacancy or more unless you take off the top two floors. Moving on to the expense allowance. I did not bring this up in my questioning, so we'll go through it here, perhaps on one of the other properties as well. The expense allowance, the city, forgive me if we've all heard this already, I'm not sure, I know that two of you have, Mr. Stenning, I'm not sure if you've sat in on presentations regarding the non-recoverable expenses yet in this cycle. But I'll just go through it quickly here. With regard to the expense allowance, the City of Winnipeg has historically had two stages of expense allowance, one being what was termed the management expense, which was always a 5% allowance, and the other being other expense, which was a 2% allowance. This historically goes back into the 1990s. The 2% allowance was always explained at the board in many hearings that I attended as an allowance for structural repair for the building, and the management allowance was essentially a misnomer. It was termed management and kind of treated as a property management expense, when in reality it was really intended in the beginning to be a non-recoverable expense amount covering all of the non-recoverable costs that an owner faces outside of operating costs and taxes that they can recover from their tenancies. So looking at my page number 13, we'll run through this quickly. As noted, the 5% management expense allowance has been used by the city in all prior assessment cycles. For the 2020 property assessment cycle, this has been eliminated. The Appraisal Institute of Canada is the governing body of the property appraisal profession in Canada and is responsible for provision of education to its membership through a partnership with the UBC. The standard appraisal text provided to students, candidate members, is the Appraisal of Real Estate, 3rd Canadian edition by the Appraisal Institute of Canada. And in reference to the income approach to value, it states in Chapter 21, the formula for the calculation of the net operating income is summarized as follows. Potential gross income minus vacancy and collection loss, also known as vacancy and bad debt allowance, equals effective gross income. Pardon me. To this, you subtract operating expenses that are paid by the landlord, stabilized annual expenses, in order to derive the final net operating income. So very clearly it states that the operating expenses that are paid by the landlord need to be deducted from the effective gross income. The reference to operating expenses paid by the landlord refers to non-recoverable operating expenses or expenses that cannot be recovered from the tenants of the property through the standard operating expense recoveries. These non-recoverable operating expenses are standard expenses incurred by a property and serve to reduce the overall net operating income to the owner. Standard non-recoverable operating expenses include expense categories such as, but not limited to, the following: professional fees, legal, accounting, other professional fees, asset management, landlord work, leasing commissions, tenant improvements, which there is some debate about, owner repair and maintenance, exclusive of structural repair, marketing, tenant inducements, which would include such items as free rent, etc., credit checks, and in some cases property management fees where they're excluded in some leases. Where you have government tenancies, typically property management is excluded or partially excluded in all of those leases, typically fully excluded. Now, in my brief that I was able to submit in time for the hearing, you'll note on my page 14 there that at that time we had done a study of 61 investment properties for the reference here for the 2020 assessment cycle, and our average non-recoverable operating expenses that we were able to determine at that time were 13% of effective gross income for those properties. Since that time, we've done a more extensive study, which I guess I will present in a second one of our other properties here today. And we have done a 3-year history covering 2016, 17, and 18 operating years. And our expenses have come in very similarly to that 13%, slightly under. What we did was divide the, we came up with 2 categories, one being non-recoverable expenses exclusive of tenant improvements, and then non-recoverable expenses inclusive of tenant improvements. And the figures for our results from that are not shown in the brief today, but they are in the 11 in the three-year average. They're 11.5 for non-recoverable exclusive of TI, and roughly 12.5 for non-recoverable, inclusive of tenant improvements. So clearly, the expenses that are borne by the landlords are significantly higher than what was projected as 5%. However, in recognition of the past valuation model as well as overall equity, we are recommending that simply the former 5% allowance be reinstituted in whatever manner it's reinstituted. It's not a management fee. It's not property management that is fully recoverable from tenancies. It is non-recoverable expenses that are borne by the landlord. Moving on, the shortfall allowance for the subject property, I did make a slight error here. I noted that I was using $8 a square foot. We've reduced that to $6.50 a square foot. The actual costs came out to, as noted, $7.53. We've reduced it to the parameter of $6.50. So that gives you a shortfall amount of $22,000.48, which boosts our net income up to $78,468.
Just repeat that
Which
number for me,
page?
please.
On page
78,000.
number 14.
Yeah,
So our final net income is $78,468.
thank you.
Moving on to page number 15 and capitalization. So at the top of the page, we have a number of actual transactions and their actual capitalization rates from the marketplace. The one that I would probably point you to the most to start with, number one, is a sale that we were dealing with here today. That was 130 Osborne, 435 Stradbrook, and then a separate parking lot that's located just off the laneway in behind them. These three properties are a single entity and sold for $4,250,000 at a cap rate of 7.5%. So this is property on the corner of Stradbrook and Osborne. It has parking available on site right in front of the units on Stradbrook. The other 130 Osborne fronts right on Osborne, has no second and third floor space to lease. It's all main floor space. And then there's additional parking that they have available just off of the rear lane in behind for customers to come and or tenants to park in. So our cap rate there is 7.5%. Looking at the subject property, you can see our other caps range from 7.1 up to 9.1%. Looking at our subject property, again, let's look at the factors that would come into play here. We have the location in Osborne Village. You have the lack of parking. You have the inadequate floor plan and layout, as well as second and third floor space. You have the age of the structure, 1906. Obviously, things have changed since 1906, and there has been some updating. But that is your original structure. Condition of the property, as well as construction quality. So you're looking at a building with ongoing vacancy issues that would be extremely difficult to remedy and are indeed uneconomic. That's why it hasn't been redone. All of these factors taken into account, we've used a 9% cap rate for this. So if you use our revised net income of $78,468 at 9%, this gives you final market value of $872,000. And if you look at the decision from 2018, we've increased from 708,000 up to the $872,000, significant jump. Obviously, an 89% increase for a property is not realistic within the market. That is my presentation.
Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Smith, first thing, did you aware about the parking? Parking is not a requirement at the Osborne Village, this area?
I'm aware of it, but it doesn't change the attractiveness of the tenant spaces.
And also, if you use the reconstructed prints using $10.62 as a overall print for this property, but also you verbally mentioned rents range from $10 to $15 range. If you see my brief, you can see my range is exact what you mentioned, $15 to $10 range print I used. Is it correct?
I'm certain it is. I'm not looking at it, but
Okay. Oh, okay.
I believe
thank you.
your overall rental rate comes in at
$12.99,
so
something
significantly
like
above where we're at for the subject.
Okay, and also I'm kindly asking to move to your last page of brief, that means the income statement. I'm focusing what they reported as a rent. They reported $227,730,
Right.
which is, as per you, it is a semi-gross rent. They corrected.
Correct.
Okay, then if I move to one page above, that's the second last page. They mention about they recovered almost everything. It is a non-recoverable expenses for them is $7,669.33, which is including leasing commission, which is we are not considered.
Well,
No.
you may not consider it, but it should be.
Yeah, no, I just mentioned,
Yeah.
Even they recovered, they did not recover approximately $7,000.
For this particular year.
Particular unit. And also, did you aware they reported net operating income as $116.78. But I'm kind of confused with the reconstructed net income approach and what they actually reported, because we give the most weight what they actually reported in the income expenses measure. And also,
So that, I'm not sure what I'm answering there.
yeah, my question is, did you check those income expenses mailer before you do the reconstructed income approach?
Yes, we did. And the accounting that is done for it, I can't entirely explain, but having discussions with property management and having looked at the summaries of leases, they are indeed semi-gross, and they are, as I've indicated, with the base stops as indicated, so they're net to the owner as I have described on page number 10.
Okay, yeah, it's really made too difficult to tell
And
the page
certainly
number.
it is difficult
Yeah.
when you have gross and semi-gross. I understand
Yeah.
the confusion with the final net to the owner out of that.
But if you solely focus on the net rent, they reported, if you use the unit 103, unit 105, unit 109, it's net rent, right?
Where are we
Uh,
looking?
because no page numbers. I can show the page. It is master rent roll. Original page is page 1. Master rent roll page 1. It's in his brief. Yeah. Master rent roll page 1.
Yes, no,
So
I
for
do
your
see that, but-
classification, are those 3 rents gross, semi-gross or net?
And what were the tenants that we were looking at again?
Silver Lotus, Judith K, and 7325844 Manitoba Limited.
So having looked at the lease summaries that were provided to me for the tenancies, it was clear that they were semi-gross, so I'm not sure what has been reported with regard to the rent roll here, but my information is that it is semi-gross, and it has always been a semi-gross basis as I've presented. So I can't really explain that to you.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, I'm
I
actually in a
understand.
really hard position because it's the information are inconsistent
Yeah.
because if I go more in detail, we have looked for the inconsistent information, but I'm not going to go deeper in this area because I know the information it is a combination of, you agree it is a combination of net rents, semi-gross rent and gross rent for this property.
Having reviewed the information that was presented to me with regard to summaries of the leases, my information is that they were semi-gross rents. The vacant ones aside, we assigned net rent to those particular units. And I certainly understand your position and what you're indicating here, and I can't really explain that to you. But I would point to the fact that the market value derived in the last cycle was calculated in the same manner as well. So I don't believe that the rents that are there have changed from semi-gross, but I cannot explain that to you, so we're in a difficult position.
Okay, that means
Both
are you
of us.
rejecting the rent roll is as it correct, or are you
I have no
accepting
further
rent?
comment with regard to the rent roll that has been included.
Okay. And non-recoverable expenses, I would like to present the rebuttal evidence.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask one last question before I move to the rebuttal? About the income approach. Mr. Smith, okay, I'll go with the rebuttal. This is the rebuttal information. I'm not going to go through the whole information. This year we are presenting as a 2% of non-recoverable expenses. So if I speak to the Mr. Smith presentation about the how they calculated about the 2% and 5%, and also I read in his page number 13 information, and you did search on 61 properties, is that right? You came up with the conclusion?
At that time, we had reviewed 61 properties
61
for a single year,
properties, okay.
yes.
And your conclusion is non-recoverable expenses is 13%, but you are using 5%?
We are indeed using 5%, yes.
Okay, but your calculation, you use 5% for management, 2% for other, and also vacancy shortfall.
Correct.
Okay, as previously, okay. That means it's more than 5%, is that correct? Even though you conclude as a 5%?
I'm not following you.
Okay, because you conclude as a 13% of non-recoverable expenses in page number 14.
I have I'll just explain. The expense allowance figure, 7%, is representative of the original 2% structural other amount, as well as the 5% that we've asked to be reinstituted, which is representative of the additional non-recoverable expenses borne by the landlord, misnamed by the city previously as a management expense. So that's what the 7% refers to.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have some board orders. For the leasing commission, tenant inducement, tenant improvements, and free rents. And I put all the board order numbers and the conclusion in here to show why we are not using those funds to adjust our net non-recoverable expenses. And we did some search, and also asset management is a totally different thing than the particular property management. You can read those ones. I'm not going to read all the information here to show, but I'm defending we are not using the leasing commission, tenant inducement, tenant improvements, free rent, or asset management to adjust them to net of non-recoverables. We did search, we did a study, but this is the part of the studies, and there is a address, road numbers and the properties what we use, and we did the analysis to find out what should be the non-recoverable amount. We kind of came across with the 1.12 medium should be the non-recoverable expenses for the use for the property for this cycle. And now I'm going back to Mr. Smith's briefs, and attachment of attachment is the one page before. It's the non-recoverable expenses. They only manage this property is recovered everything. It's only the non-recoverable expenses as per our study is at $2,158.73 because it's a hydro. That's the non-recoverable expenses. If I check those ones with what we use in our brief, we already given 21,642 for non-recoverable expenses, which is 2%, and the vacancy showed.
Just hang on a minute. What page are on here?
Page number 3 in my.
Okay.
This
fair
one.
enough, yeah.
We are giving 21,642, which is including 25% oversight error. It's there. But we are giving that 21,642 as a non-recoverable expenses, which
That's a shortfall, huh?
It's a shortfall. Yeah, it's altogether. Sorry, expenses 2,593 plus shortfall, because non-recoverable expenses are the non-recoverable 2% and vacancy shortfall also within that parameters. Then we are using that number is around 24,000, which is so much higher than actual they are non-recoverable expenses. That's why we are considering this cycle. Almost all the properties recovered their expenses. then it's 2% is within the range of non-recoverable expenses, combined with the non-recoverable expenses plus vacancy shortfall allowance. That's my rebuttal evidence. That's all my questions too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I do.
On the rebuttal evidence?
I do. So the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department would belong to a national assessment body organization, I believe, correct?
Yes.
And does the model as changed for 2020, does that align with other assessment organizations' models with regard to non-recoverable expenses?
Yes, as my knowledge is SAMA and Ontario. The SAMA is using almost 2%, and the Ontario, I can't remember the numbers. We read it, and that's two
Okay.
examples, but others too.
So we'll deal with that in my rebuttal when we get there. You also have members that are part of the Appraisal Institute of Canada, I believe. The information as presented and as taught by the Appraisal Institute indicates that non-recoverable fees outside of including structural and the expense categories that I included are intended to be deducted from the effective gross income as well as shortfall. How is it that the city doesn't follow that valuation?
If I'm clearly saying, we have some board orders, municipal board orders for how we leasing commission, tenant improvement, and tenant inducement and free rent. We are applying those municipal board orders in place. And also asset management, also we clearly say that it is the business management for the big portfolio properties. So it is not one of the property management expense, it's the asset management expenses for the total portfolio. That's why we are not putting those funds. That's our stand for this cycle. But
Okay. So historically, and this goes back into the 1990s, the city of Winnipeg has had expense categories for what was termed management, which was always a 5% allowance, and a second category that was referred to as other, which was a 2% allowance, and that again goes back over many cycles. What has changed between the past and now that we see such a drastic change from an overall 7% down to 2%?
okay, if I clearly said, historically, that's what we did the study at that time. That time we came up with the 7% is fair. We are continually doing studies and researchers and the modeling group doing their work. And now we have proven all of those management fees are recovered from the tenants, and no longer we do not have a requirement of giving 5% management. So it is a continuous study and our researchers. It's proven now, even these, I have only these 9 addresses, proven management is recovered. It is I think it's a part of improving.
Right. So you had said there management is recovered, correct? So you're referring to property management being recovered from the tenancies,
Yes.
correct? Okay. So your characterization is that management fee was a property management fee, and that it's fully recoverable from the tenants. That's what the city's position is?
Management, yes, if I might use the wrong wording, but management is a management cost. It's recovered, not management fee. If you try to single out the management fee wording, I might apologize about using the management fee, but it's a management cost is recovered from the tenant.
So I'm confused then, you're saying the non-recoverable costs are recovered from the tenants?
Not non-recoverable, because we are giving still the 2% non-recoverable amount, which is stand for any expenses not recovered by tenant, but any structural repairs, not the big capital structural, any of the here and there structural repairs, any fees not recovered by tenant. Within that 2% allowance we are giving, and also we are giving vacancy shortfall, which is a part of non-recovery.
Okay, so looking at the board orders that are presented here, and I want to make sure that I get the right ones. So on your, I guess it would be the page 3, file 97A1-905 and -906, it states, the board reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce the income for the purposes of calculating market value. So essentially what I've gone, forgive me, but I'm just looking at this again for the second time, I guess. There's, if you read through these decisions, the intent of the decisions is that the net rent that was achieved, or the net rent that is applied for the tenants in these cases is not to be reduced by tenant inducements, is essentially what is being said in these cases, is my reading and interpretation, and in consultation with others, they've indicated the same thing. On the income side, the net rent is not to be reduced from the level that takes into account the tenant inducement. So if you have a $15 net rent for shell space, and then you provide a tenant inducement equal to another $5, and you get a $20 net rent, you can't reduce that net income by $5 down to 15, is essentially what's being said there. It does not indicate that it should not be deducted from the expense side, and indeed that is the balance. You can't charge the expense on one side and not deduct on the other, is essentially what's being stated in the cases that we're reviewing here. Just with regard to the study on the last page here, so, forgive me, when I get to my rebuttal, I see that our final study is not included at the very back, which is disturbing, but in any case, we're looking at your page number 5 here, and we have 5 properties that are included of varying types. The city has access to thousands of income-producing properties, income and expense forms, I believe, correct? But we're only looking at a sample size of 9% and simply 1 year in the study that's been done and presented to the board. Has there been a larger study done to determine these figures?
You mean that we should have provided more numbers than this, more data than this one? That's what you tried to.
Well, it is the study a study
This
of
is,
9,
yeah, this is the
9
part
properties?
of the, part of the study, because I did not bring everything, because I only bring properties related to us, and that's all. If you see the original list, it's longer than this one, but this is the only properties.
And is it representative of a single year, or is it over a time horizon?
I'm not aware about that. Yeah, I cannot answer them.
Okay. Okay. Those are my questions.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Smith, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are you allowed me to answer the previous question? This is aware about the single year of the period of the time?
Yeah, I thought you had.
Yeah, I answered, but it came to my mind, the
Okay.
answer came to my mind a little later. We stabilized for 3 years to get these numbers.
No, I'm okay. I'm good. No question.
Do you have any questions? I guess we're on Mr. Sabins, or Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith, I have some questions for Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I do too.
So-
I got a bit confused with who.
I haven't-
Rebuttal of what?
We're not there yet. Are there any
Okay.
questions of the rebuttal evidence?
Well, I have questions of his main evidence, which he's talked to.
Okay, I guess we'll deal with rebuttal evidence first from the city, so do you have questions?
I don't want to rebuttal, no.
Okay, and,
Of the 9 properties listed on your page 5, question A is, does the department have actual leases for these properties? Or are you just relying on the rent roll?
I think we rely on the rent roll, but I cannot answer one by one.
Right.
It's a lease, some we have a lease, some has the rent roll, the both.
Okay, well, that was my question.
okay. All right, so I have no questions, so you can present your rebuttal evidence. then.
Great, thank you.
And for the remainder of the properties on today's agenda, we'll assume that all this evidence is common to them all.
Absolutely. So I'll just wait for you there.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so with regard to non-recoverable expenses, you've got my rebuttal document before you there. It's for all of the properties that we're dealing with today. There's a number of points. The first being the City of Winnipeg has historically included 2 categories of non-recoverable expenses in addition to shortfall amount in the expenses that are allowed in arriving at the final net operating income. I have presented the City of Winnipeg's documents from 2012 onwards for the titled the Evaluation of Income Producing Properties, both for the 2012, 2016, 2018, and 2020 assessment roll years for City of Winnipeg. So this is the City of Winnipeg's document itself. If you flip to my page number 3, you can see in the yellow highlighting there how the model is intended to derive the net operating income. So we have NOI equals potential annual income less vacancy and collection loss minus non-recoverable operating expenses. Flip slightly beyond that into the office and retail area on my page number 11. And we get to the allowances that are made for these various types. So looking at page number 11, non-recoverable operating expenses, you have the different shortfall amounts that are shown on the chart at the top of the page for the various categories of office and retail. And below that, there's 2 other categories. One, as termed by the city management, for all office and retail properties, the city is allowed a 5% vacancy, or rather 5% expense allowance for this. And then we have other expenses at 2%. In numerous hearings that I was involved in for the board here in the last decade or so, the other expenses that are indicated at 2%, were always indicated to be a structural allowance for the property. That being to accommodate the non-recoverable structural costs that an owner would face in maintaining a property. Now, these costs don't necessarily pop up every single year, so when you look at the subject property and say, well, in the subject year, they had $7,000 or $8,000 of non-recoverable operating expenses, that's fine. But we're not looking at a single year, we're looking at the property over time, and what would the norm be when you take into account, say, a five-year history of the property? What are the expenses that they have over that time frame, and what would they be on a normalized basis? So the 2% has always been intended to be a structural allowance. Again, that's been indicated to me numerous times here before the board. And the 5% allowance has always been there, mislabeled as management allowance by the city. The next number of pages are identical to this, both for the 2016 and 2018 years. You feel free to go through them, but they indicate the exact same model. If you flip to my page number 37, 2020 general assessment, and we're just covering the same ground here, but if you look at page number 40, net operating income is indicated that it should be calculated in the same way. NOI equals potential annual income minus vacancy and collection loss minus non-recoverable operating expenses. Then we get into the model itself, and the page number 49, you have your shortfall amounts for non-recoverable vacant space indicated at the top of the page, and at the bottom of the page we have the management category as termed by the city, indicating a 0% allowance, while the other is now 2%, same as it had been in the past. That 2% is now being portrayed as encompassing all the non-recoverable expenses, whereas that was not the case in all prior cycles that I have been a party to, and indeed going back into the 1990s. If we want to talk about inconsistent presentation of material, and not with regard to the assessor sitting here today, certainly, but inconsistency, we're looking at a changing of terminology, essentially, and an adjustment of the model that is not borne out by the information that would be provided to the city, taking into account all true non-recoverable operating expenses. So we've seen a massive change between 2018 to the 2020 cycle, all prior cycles being the same. We go from 7% overall non-recoverable expenses down to 2%, and it's being stated that this is now encompassing of all of the non-recoverable costs. Well, it doesn't bear out in the marketplace when you review the information. So I'm not sure what the city is including in their calculations, but it doesn't appear to reflect all of the non-recoverable expenses that one would account for, and that are indeed accounted for by other organizations. So moving on to my page number 51, I have already discussed the Appraisal Institute of Canada methodology as taught to the members of the Appraisal Institute, the main valuation governing body in Canada. Certainly for appraisers, we're the main valuation profession in Canada. Moving beyond that, we look at the assessment organizations for Ontario as well as Saskatchewan in my material at the back here. So page number 51, this is NPAC's methodology guide, valuing shopping centers in Ontario, valuation date of January 1, 2016, came out in August 2016, has not been updated since that time. The material that is presented there indicates the type of properties that are covered under this on page numbers 54 and 55, pretty inclusive of all retail. Moving on to page number 57, data analysis. This is with regard to how the data should be gathered and analyzed. I've highlighted number 5 here. Moving through the list, establish rents by tenant type. Number 3. Number 4, establish typical market vacancy rates. Number 5, establish typical non-recovered operating expense allowances for page 57. Page 59, again, the highlighted area, establishing NOI. Net operating income equals effective gross income minus non-recoverable operating expenses. So one would think that would be the same as the cities, but when you move into page number 60, it states non-recoverable operating expenses in the highlighted area there. Non-recoverable operating expenses are expenses to the property owner that are not recovered from tenants in order to maintain and generate an income stream. In a typical shopping center, tenants are on net leases, and the operating costs, such as real property taxes, heating, air conditioning, etc., are collected from the tenant, independent of the rent paid for the occupied space. Typically 2 areas where the property owner has to cover expenses. Non-recoverable operating expenses, which are not passed on to the tenants, such as legal and audit fees, advertising and promotional fees, and expenses associated with operating any vacant space. So that being your shortfall, the last one, and the non-recoverable operating expenses, as indicated above that, falling outside of that amount. Pardon me. They've indicated a couple of expense lines here, but indeed not all of them that should be accounted for. The only one that really, well, perhaps two, there's asset management as well as tenant inducements, which are the subject of debate, but there's numerous other categories as presented in my material that should be included in the non-recoverables. It is possible to express all non-recoverable operating expenses as a percentage reduction from the AGI. Excluded expenses, just under that, we're looking at depreciation, mortgage, or debt service, and income taxes or taxes associated to the business, obviously excluded from any calculations. Note that structural repairs and capital cost items are typically excluded from lease arrangements made with tenants. So there it's indicating that the structural allowance is indeed part of the non-recoverables and should be included. Page number 61, you have an example of the NOI calculation. So we have effective
If I
gross
can
income.
simplify here, I don't think there's any dispute that non-recoverables should be accounted for. The question is, at what level?
Right, so just to address that point, on page 61, the example of NOI calculation, you have effective gross income less total non-recoverable operating expenses, which in the example here they've designated as 5% in their example. Not that that is specifically the number, but that is what they've used. Moving on to the document at the back, it will present virtually the same material from SAMA with regard to SAMA being the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. This is their shopping center market value assessment document, the evaluation guide for such. If you go through the material presented here again, it states the same material. Page number 69, establishing NOI. There are 2 areas where the property owner must cover expenses: non-recoverable operating expenses that being expenses that are not passed on to the tenants and vacant space shortfall. EGI must be reduced by the amounts of non-recoverable operating expenses and vacant space shortfall. So yes, it does cover the same degree. Bottom of page 69, with regard to what they include, we have legal and audit fees, structural repairs, and repairs that are capital in nature, outside standard maintenance and repair, advertising and promotion, and leasing commissions. Now, there are a number of ones that fall outside of this, but you can see that there's additional ones that are included by these other assessment organizations that the city is not accounting for. So it appears that the city has changed their valuation model from not just what they have historically followed, which had some basis, I'm assuming, but they've also changed from being in line with the other assessment organizations across Canada as well. Our study, which is not included here, unfortunately, covered 3-year history. We had between 45 and 50 properties that were covered in detail, where we had all of the year-end statements available to us and detailed material to be sure we were accurate. And our overall ranges were between 11.5% TI excluded and 12.5% roughly TI included, that being an average over the 3-year span for those properties. So it's clear that non-recoverable expenses are not just 5% or 7%, they're indeed higher than that, but we're not asking for a greater amount than what was allowed for historically by the city. We're simply asking for the reinstitution of the non-recoverable expenses representative of the 5%, it not being a management expense, not being a property management expense. So overall, we're looking at a 7% non-recoverable operating expense. That is my presentation.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Smith, you have attached, I'm summarizing my questions because you attached 2012 and 2016 our guidelines, public guidelines. If we see those guidelines, we very clearly stated as a management 5%, other expenses 2%. Is that right?
That is what it says, yes.
Okay. Then 2020, what we did, management 0, other expenses non-recoverable 2%. Is that right?
No, because in 2020 it doesn't say other expenses non-recoverable. Which page is that on, 2020?
If we go to page number 49, if you follow the same structure.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
looking at the same one.
non-recoverable operating expenses is the heading in the top, 40
Yeah.
page, what is 49? And there is the 3 categories, shortfall, management and other expenses. Shortfall, the chart is as it is. Management is 0, other expenses is 2%, is that right?
That is what it says, yes.
Okay. And
But it does not refer to, in any case, go on.
okay, so if I move to our income calculation, we are still giving 2% non-recoverable, is that right?
You are giving 2% non-recoverable, but in my estimation, what was always stated as a structural allowance, non-recoverable, has now been compressed to include all non-recoverable into that 2%,
Okay.
and the 5% has been removed.
Okay, is there any way in this document are we classified as the 2% only the structural reserve?
No, but
No.
as
Are we
stated,
mentioned as the other expenses, other non-recoverable as the 2%?
as I stated before, yes, in your
Yes.
document, yes, it does say
Okay.
that. Having
Then-
been before this board numerous times, I have had it stated to me that The 2% allowance is a allowance for non-recoverable structural repairs that the owner cannot recover from the tenants by countless assessors before the
Yes,
board.
I understand what you are coming from, but I'm presenting the document in front of me, document stated as it is. I did not know about the other assessors what they told, but our document is clearly said is the other non-recoverable are 2%.
No, it says other expenses. It
Other
does not
expenses,
say
right, other expenses,
non-recoverable
but it's
expenses.
other expenses, but main topic is the non-recoverable expenses. So I might, do you agree is the non-recoverable other expenses still we are using 2%?
No, I disagree that you have compressed the non-recoverables into a category. It's a change in terminology, but it appears that the city has indicating that they've taken all non-recoverables and compressed them into one category, because in my estimation, it's the management category as named by the city was a misnomer, and there is some consideration that property management, which isn't what this is fully recoverable from tenancies. No argument there. Property management typically is, unless you have government tenants or leases where it's not recoverable, which there certainly are out there. But it appears that the city has erred in treating the management allowance as a property management allowance and saying, well, you're double dipping by allowing an additional expense for that when you're already recovering that expense from the tenancies.
Okay. I would like to move to page number 60 in your rebuttal. And if I'm reading right, non-recoverable operating expenses. Non-recoverable operating expenses are expenses to the property owner that are not recovered from the tenants in order to maintain and generate the income stream. Is that what I totally reiterated before, what we use as the city of Winnipeg right now?
That is what you have indicated. It's a matter of what is included in that what is included in the non-recoverable, and it does not appear that the city is including all the categories that should be included.
Okay. And page number 61, the Ontario using 5% of non-recoverable expenses. Is that right? As per your page.
Well, in that example,
Yeah.
whether they use 5%, I can't say, but it is there in their document. I don't imagine it would be less than that.
In page number 69, it is the SAMA document. And you listed what they consider as the non-recoverable expenses, and only the leasing commission, I submitted the rebuttal evidence. All the other expenses, I never have any argument about that. We agree those are non-recoverable expenses. But the question for me, the leasing commission, we have the Manitoba Municipal Board order. Do you agree for that?
You have a municipal board order. It's got a number of them in your document there. And as I indicated, you go through it. And I'm not looking at this one. I dealt with this on Thursday, so I'm assuming it's the same. The cases that were presented were indicating that one could not reduce the net rent by the tenant inducements. So you could not reduce gross income side by the tenant inducements is what was indicated in there, fair enough. But the issue of the tenant inducements, et cetera, leasing commissions, et cetera, as non-recoverable expenses is not what's being addressed there. That indeed, if you can't allow those costs, tenant inducements, tenant improvements on the income side, you must deduct them from the expense side. Otherwise, you're inflating the value of the property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all my questions.
Okay, Mr. Stenning, do you have questions on the rebuttal, Mr. Smith's rebuttal?
No, I really don't. I think, I'll wait till we discuss. I'm a bit confused with the, all of this non-recoverable operating expenses. There seems to be a difference of opinions of what's here. It's sort of, it's a bit confusing. So I'll just put it on the back burner.
Okay.
I have a question that goes back to Mr. Smith's original submission, if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I'll go to my rebuttal question. So you mentioned that there is no parking with this particular property, correct?
Correct.
So
Dedicated parking.
I'm looking at the last 2 pages of the income statement, and they have a category there where parking lot repair and maintenance for the year ending in 2018 was $86,000. And then they have parking revenue on page 1 of the following page, $4,140.
Just trying to find the line that you're indicating.
Line account 3,300, right at the top.
Okay.
On your last page.
Okay. So,
Now, I mean, you could,
so you're,
the issue of parking lot repair and maintenance seems to be a significant amount of money.
right, so the income and expense statement that you have there is as generated at year end and submitted for to the owner and to the city. They have no on-site parking for this building. If you look at my page number 6, the site description, the boundaries of the roll number are the boundaries of the building. This is taken directly off of the City of Winnipeg's assessment site. It's in gray, I guess, because we're not in color here, but the red outline of that block is the roll number that we're discussing. So any parking that they may have available would be off-site and in another location. And indeed, I know that some of these properties have arrangements with parking on the other, on I guess it would be the east side of the road. I don't know that that's the case, and I can't explain the parking expenses to you beyond that, but it's certainly not encompassed within the roll number itself.
So this building is 103 Osborne, correct?
Correct.
Both parties agree it's 103 Osborne?
It is.
So this income statement is 103 and 111 Osborne.
So, if you'll permit me, I'm just going to quickly see if we can clear that up, as this was unanticipated.
Okay.
There is a corner building that is owned by the same ownership that is where the former Basil's restaurant is. I don't know that that's 111, and in fact, it isn't. So, yeah, it is 103 to 111. I cannot explain the parking expenses to you beyond what I know.
If you allow me, I can answer that question.
Certainly.
Okay. When I see that multiple addresses, civic addresses in the Trent Road, I particularly go and check where the 107, 111 and where the 107 or 103.
103.
Because it's a particular one building, but it has two civic addresses, but it's a one row number. Then we consider as a one economic
okay.
unit, because we have those kind of properties. I'm very particular about that.
Okay, thanks.
The other question has to do with if you turn to page 63 on Mr. Smith's rebuttal evidence, and I'm just looking for some clarification. This document was dated June 27th, 2012, and I think the city's 2012 document referenced the 5% non-recoverable as allowable back then. Is there no current documentation from SAMA? Because I believe the assessor had indicated that they no longer use the 5%.
No. There is no published material available from SAMA online that's available that indicates any change in the valuation model, including any removal of non-recoverable allowance.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Yeah. I did not check personally myself about the SAMA document,
Okay.
but I talked with the management who prepared the rebuttal evidence, and they very clearly, I asked the question, they clearly said actually SAMA is not using 5% at all. They are using 2% or lower, because SAMA use a different methodology, but their one is more lower. That's all I know.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just wanted some clarification on no further questions.
Okay, just on your interpretation of the board order, that doesn't, I mean, it seems pretty clear if you look at the top of page 3. It says the board reiterates that tenant
We're
improvements.
discussing the city's rebuttal now?
Yeah. Well, you presented in your rebuttal as well, your interpretation of these orders. It says the board reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating market value. It has not been the practice of the board to allow these expenses, and the board is satisfied that they should not be treated as expenses, period. Not recoverable, non-recoverable, doesn't matter. It says they shouldn't be treated as expenses.
Okay, so that's one. So, and forgive me, I had a rebuttal document presented to me on Thursday for the first time, read through the orders, and a number of them were exactly as I presented to you, where it indicated that the net rent applied to tenants could not be reduced by the tenant inducements or tenant improvement allowances. It was clear in those ones. If the rebuttal document is different and we're looking at slightly different cases, then perhaps that does not apply, and the city has adjusted what they've presented to the board, and indeed that those cases are out there too, where it indicates that no, you can't
Well,
reduce
we
the net.
can produce what we see in front of us. Just those
Fair enough.
cases out in front of are there. It's not
Right,
really
so-
very persuasive.
Well, the city is now presenting an altered case to the board after last Thursday then, because if
I
we
don't
don't
think so. I
have all
think
of
that-
the
I mean,
I think
information.
this is the same document.
It's the same document.
There was at minimum one more presented here. If I may, let me read through it, as these things go very quickly, and I don't want to be in error here.
Okay. And I will, as a general comment, if you're going to be presenting board orders, it's always best to have the full order in front of us.
I apologize for that one. I was kind of running behind. I did not get a chance to print the full order, but if board wants to read it, I have the one copy because I rushed to photocopy multiple, but I did not get a chance to with those ones. But
Okay,
I
that's-
have the full copy. I can view.
It is always possible to differentiate based on the evidence presented.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Well, I have no real further comment with regard to the municipal board orders presented. I will do a more diligent job of finding the municipal board orders that indicate that these particular expenses should be accounted for. Really what we're looking at is the city essentially terming what was an expense allowance for non-recoverable as management and taking the opportunity to call that property management and thereby removing it from the allowance that is used in the valuation model.
Okay, those are my questions. Now, on his presentation in general, his main brief, do you have any questions on his main brief?
Oh, I had the one regarding parking.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm, all I need. Thank you.
Okay, summation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My summation solely focused on non-recoverable expenses. As my personal study, reading through the material and all the information in front of me, suggest city remove the management, non-recoverable management 5%, and keep the 2% other non-recoverable expenses and the shortfall allowance. It is the concluding it should be 7% or 2%. That's what we discussed mostly on today. Non-recoverable expenses 2% include anything owner cannot recover from the tenant. It could be tenant, and it could be any advertising fees, any kind of repairs, structural repairs, any other expenses cannot recover by the tenant. Within the, we should be 2%. 2% is the number we came up with as a general, but my study showed the median is 1.2 non-recoverable expenses. It's the only 9 properties listed here. It suggests 1.2, but we generalize for 2% non-recoverable plus shortfall allowance. So I'm kindly asking to panel members to consider all the evidence presented today for the 2% non-recoverable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith?
Very briefly on the non-recoverable issue. Non-recoverable expenses are standard expenses incurred by a property and serve to reduce the overall net operating income to the owner. These are all expenses that are typical to the operation of the building that cannot be recovered from the tenants, exclusive of financing, exclusive of business expenses, and those are obviously very clear. So there are a number of expenses that go into operating a building that one cannot recover from a tenant that need to be accounted for, whether the city accepts that those should be included or not, or if they've limited it to a very narrow band of what those expenses should be. It's clear from the Appraisal Institute of Canada, the main valuation body in Canada, that these expenses include a significant number of expense categories that should be included in the value. Now, with regard to the subject property itself, we're looking at an 89% increase in market value from $708,000 to $1,336,000. This is not a miscalculation of gross, semi-gross, net. This is a misinterpretation of how the building is operated. So the building has ongoing vacancy that will continue. That would obviously affect what one would pay for the building. And to my knowledge, one can't park on top of this building, so I have no idea what the parking expenses is that are being referred to here. Perhaps they've combined another of their properties in here by mistake on that particular expense. That is my summation.
Okay, thank you for that, and we'll take a short break now, a 10-minute break, and reconvene. Thank you. you. We will come back to order, and I guess the next property on the agenda is 1400 House. So you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address, 1400 Ellis Avenue. Roll number 1309605810C. Sorry, I will repeat it. Roll number 1309605810C. The property originally valued for 13,170,000. Today I'm making a recommendation to change value. I would like to share my calculation. Please turn page number 2. This property sold in 2014 for 7 million, and I have put here this information in the page 2. They reported net rents. Net rents starting $40, $28. Those are higher net rents. We originally valued this one as a neighborhood shopping center. This is considered as a neighborhood shopping center. No change into consideration.
Change to?
Neighborhood shopping center. This is not neighborhood shopping center. My recommendation also based on the neighborhood shopping center. But previewing this property has 4 vacant units. So that's vacant amount calculated to be, and also they are reported vacant unfinished in our system. I did not inspect those 4 units recently. I believe it's still the vacant unfinished. Unfinished means floor is done, walls are done, but no tenant improvements there. Considering those ones, I'm giving 12% vacancy allowance for this property. That's my proposal. And using 2% other non-recoverable expenses, and shortfall adjusted to $10 per square feet from the original $8 per square feet to carry as a carryover cost for owner for use these unfinished vacant units. Cap rate adjusted to 7.5 based on the unfinished units. So my new calculation came up as the 11,137,000 will be 2020 value, revised value.
And how do you feel about that amount?
We're not in agreement. We thank the city for their work on it, but we're not in agreement with that value.
And if I remind you to this is with the error in your calculation. This property.
This particular one?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you remind me again which?
Okay.
Do you, would it need a few minutes to?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, so rather than have it on camera.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'll just.
Okay, we'll reconvene.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see the, if you turn page number 8, you can see the location. And some Google Street Views from 2016 and 2018, how the property look like today. And also I have attached the income expenses mailer, they sent it to us. They reported the rent was $1,049,901. That's what they reported as the potential gross rent. Then, so they recovered all the common expenses. And also they reported signage revenue, separate line as the 29,485 and other revenue. I did not consider the other revenue, but I consider the signage revenue part of their rent, net rent. My overall net rent around $30 per square feet, including signage revenue. The rent roll attached here, master rent roll. If you flip to master rent roll, this page, you can see the vacant units as they are, and also they are expecting rent as the $32 per square feet. But I am using for vacant units, $25 units and $27 units. Those are the model driven rents. All the rents, they have a sign, they very clearly put the sign rental included here, even though they included in the separate line. They reported as a rent commercial, sign rental. My rent, net rent is including sign rent and the net rent commercial together. So their net operating income is lower than ours, but it has a property tax amount there also again, even though they recovered the property tax from the tenants. And focusing on the income they reported from them, we reconstructed our net income stream. The value will be reduced to $11,137,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do you have questions, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so I'm a little confused. You're indicating that they fully recovered the property taxes? Is that what you were saying?
They are recovered property taxes, $170,200.
Right, and the total property tax amount is $241,270, so they're not fully recovering their property taxes, correct?
Okay, then it will be the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to be clear on that. So $1,400, so the these comparables here with regard to your page number 313, or I'm sorry, 655 Empress. That would be on the site of Chapters and Walmart and
You're right.
the various boxes there.
You're right.
Okay. 690 St. James, that would be right at the corner of Ness and St. James, across from Polo Park, Boston Pizza and a bank, I believe.
I'm not
Optical,
100% sure, but it's just in St. James. It's close proximate to the Polo Park.
right across from Polo Park.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And 616 St. James, that's Yee's Buffet, I believe. That's almost right at the corner of Portage Avenue and St. James, directly across from Polo Park.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is on, yeah.
Those are all of my questions.
Okay, Mr. Sten, any questions of the
No
city?
questions.
No questions.
Okay, I have no questions, so you may proceed.
Okay, so 1400 Ellis. If you flip to my page number 3 there, look at the chart at the top of the page. We had an original 2018 assessment at $11,357,000. We reached an agreement on, pardon me, on this to reduce it to $9,606,000 for the border revision in the last cycle. The value has since changed here, but our original 13 million plus was a 37% increase. Obviously that's changed today, so I'm not sure what that figure results in, but significant jump in value. I think our main points of discrepancy here are on the rental rate and obviously on the non-recoverable income portion. Our other categories match. So let's explain the rental portion. This is a relatively recent retail development. I will get you to flip to my page numbers 10 and 11 in order to show you where the property is. It fronts on Miltsteagle Drive as well as 1400 Ellis. So if you look at page number 11, you've got Home Depot over there off of Empress. Go north from there, Canadians, north from there, Winners, etc. Head across Ellis and into the interior there. 1400 Ellis sits on the corner of Ellis and Miltsteagle and runs north-south as shown on the site plan on page number 10. So it's not on the main retail thoroughfares of either St. James Street or Empress. It's not in close proximity to your major drivers of retail business, such as your Home Depots or your big boxes or your grocery stores, etc. It's a little off-center essentially within that retail node of Polo Park. Certainly well to the north of where the majority of the development has occurred. If you look at the site plan itself, your exposure on Ellis Avenue itself is not that significant. It doesn't run east-west. It's a north-south site. So as you drive down Ellis Avenue, either heading west or heading east, your visual line of sight, you're not going to see the majority of this property as you drive by. To retailers, that's critical, having good visibility and good access, ease of potential shoppers to be able to see your location is critical in driving business to your location. So the issue with the property here, if you look at the site plan, there's 4 distinct buildings fronting along Miltsteagle Drive, and then inline CRU units, commercial retail units located at the back of the site. This is where the significant vacancy has been. They have not managed to lease these units since development. For the most part, there are I'll go through it in a bit more detail in a moment here, but there are units there that they have not leased since the beginning of the development. And again, it's at the back of the site. They're obstructed from even the street view on Miltsteagle by buildings that are located in front of them. And despite a large ongoing campaign by National Commercial Brokerage, Cushman Wakefield, to tenant those units in approaching not just local tenants, but tenants nationwide, obviously chains, as well as down to local ones. They have not been able to fill those particular units at the back of the site. And again, it's due to what tenants see as being a very substandard location and not being able to drive the business that they would require in order to pay the rent at that location. So moving on to the valuation itself. First of all, there's some there are some photos of the units at the front, and there's actually a good visual representation on pages 4 and 5. At the bottom of 4, you're looking into the site from Ellis Avenue. So at the very back of the site on the right-hand side is the CRU units that I'm talking about, where they have the significant vacancy issue. And then if you look at page number 5, you're looking from the corner of Ellis and Miltsteagle Drive, obviously wall of buildings there, obscuring any view of those units that are located in behind. And then again on page number 9, probably the best visualization, and this is during construction I gather, but it still holds true. You can see how your sight lines there would be very, very blocked. So let's move on to the valuation itself. We presented the actual leases in place on page number 14 and assigned what we believe to be an achievable net rental rate to the vacant units on the bottom of page 14. Now, I entertained the idea of bringing the actual leasing agent or agents in charge of leasing this space here so that you could hear directly from somebody other than myself with regard to the difficulty of leasing this space. It's an ongoing issue, and it is going to impact the rent that they can achieve there. And in discussions with them, they feel that the $17 to $18 net rental rate is what ultimately would be achieved on those vacant units as shown on page number 14. So we've assigned an $18 rental rate to those units for that reason. These are very experienced commercial retail agents that deal with national chains as well as down to locals on an ongoing basis. So they certainly have the capacity to lease the space. Moving beyond that, we've already discussed the issues regarding leasing it out. Parking is also an issue, particularly for any potential restaurant tenants, as there would not be enough parking available on site given the requirements for parking for any additional restaurant tenancies. There would not be enough remaining parking to accommodate their needs and fall within the regulations. So $17 to $18 is what we've used. If you look at page number 16, just in terms of demand and attractiveness of the site, one of the main considerations that retailers look at is traffic counts. So what I presented here is traffic counts as of the end of 2015, which was the latest information that was available for a number of different sites for your consideration. So 1400 Ellis, we have a total of 15,900 cars at
What page are you on?
my page number 16.
Oh, I see, okay.
Halfway down the page, there's a number of sites that I've identified there. The subject site 15,900 cars at the Ellis intersection. If you look at the retail node at Regent and Lagimodier, 1573 Regent, we have 44,900 cars. Keniston, the Keniston retail node, we have 60,000 cars. 2425 Pembina, a relatively recent development, just north of the Bison Drive intersection to the University of Manitoba. We have 38,100 cars. Another recent development, 1212 St. Mary's, just south of Bishop Grandin across from St. Tel Center, 32,400 cars. You can see the trend. There's less traffic driving by, less potential customers, etc. So our potential income is based on what would they achieve in the market as stated by our experienced retail agents, as well as what they're achieving there now. So that is the income side. The vacancy, I won't go through it. We're at the same 12% as the city has adjusted theirs to. The detail is in there. It is an ongoing issue, likely to ongo for some time. The expense allowance, we've heard more than enough about that today, I would believe. I do have slightly more information for you in that in our 2018 year of the study that we did for non-recoverable operating expenses, our non-recoverable operating expense percentage exclusive of tenant improvements was 9.6%, and inclusive of tenant improvements was 10.6%. The two prior years, which I do not have available here today, were slightly higher than that. And our overall 3-year averages were roughly 11.5% for non-recoverable exclusive of TI, and 12.5% roughly inclusive of TI for the 3-year history. On the non-recoverable issue, I would also, as I probably should have pointed out in the last hearing, point out this is a significant issue. There have been a number of presentations before this board in the last week. I would urge the board to take into account decisions that have been arrived at on this issue. It would seem to me that it would be equitable for a single point of view to come forth from the board on this issue rather than having this issue go forward on a case-by-case basis over the entire course of the fall and winter here, as it seems to me that this issue is obviously a very big one, and to decide cases individually rather than on the bulk of information that has been presented to the board would probably not be equitable. Moving forth on our property here today, I think we're largely in agreement on the remainder of the valuation. In fact, we are. We have the same capitalization rate as well. The city has adjusted the cap rate to 7.5%. I will direct you to my page 20, and we do have some corrections to make to the material that I have presented there, unfortunately. So my effective gross income, using the parameters provided, should come to $869,783. 783. And the net operating income should be $776,962. And capitalizing that at 7.5% should give you a market value of $10,359,000. Which would be a significant jump from the $9,606,000 in 2018.
Is that your presentation?
That is.
Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Trevor, oh, Mr. Smith, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. If I focus on our page number 14, and all the vacant units, you have been using $80 per square feet.
Correct.
And also you address for this one, but I wanted to ask, in rent roll, they have an expected rent. Those are $32.
They do indeed have not expected rent, it may say expected rent, but that is what
That's what-
they are nominally asking for the space, which is a complete non-starter.
Okay, then my recommendation, I of course use the lower rents than what they are expecting. So you have this net rent column without including signage.
Right, I
Okay.
believe I included it in my final value.
Yeah,
but
you
not-
included in finance.
Yeah.
Then your overall rent per square feet came $28.69. If I overall the signage rent over to these properties per square feet, your rent will be $29.71. If once we included the signage, my overall rent is $30 per square feet. We are very, very close by overall because we don't have any other line item as a signage. We include signage income as a part of the net
Included,
rent.
yeah,
Part of the net rent.
right.
That's, you kind of do the math to find out how close we are in the net rents, even though it's look different.
I did see that we were somewhat close, but again, the achievable rents on those spaces, and I work with the people that are directly involved with leasing it, and they've been involved with the development of the program, the property since the beginning, and they know in intimate detail the difficulties of leasing those units. And again, outside of having one specific agent come here today, and they're very busy people, so weren't able to, they've indicated that that's what they expect ultimately to achieve on the back units.
And because you mentioned about the previous cycle agreement, how many units were leased out after the previous cycle, that between that years?
I don't have that figure. I know that there was perhaps one, maybe two that were leased since that time, but I don't have it here today.
Okay, yeah, in my knowledge, it is a one, they lease out for $28 per square feet.
One unit, okay.
Yeah.
I don't believe that would have been at the
Yeah.
back necessarily then. There was one unit that was available in one of the front buildings fronting on Milt Stiegel that, that may represent, I'm not sure.
Okay. And the calculation error is not a problem. The final focus on the rent roll, what they are reported to us. They reported their starting rent is higher than what actually you pre-constructed. If I go to just the rent, that means 3,000 account number. They are starting at 1,049,901, but you are starting at 954 $1,283,000.
So the $1,049,000 would take into account those $32 rents on the vacant units that they're not achieving.
I don't, this is actual, not projected. Because they can, then that means they are
Wow.
reporting wrong information.
Let's be cautious here. So if you look at my page number 14, and this is accurate,
Okay.
these are the areas leased. These are their net rental rates.
Yeah, I agree,
So you
That-
do the
that's-
calculation, and that is the revenue that they achieve from those units, and that's as of the valuation date of April 1. It's not early in 2017 or anything. I
But-
checked to make sure.
Yeah, but here YTD actual, it's the heading. Then I cannot, because sometimes they reported what they proposed, what they expecting, what they actually received. To my understanding, actually they collected 1,049,000. I don't have any other information to think about. This is not actually they collected for the time.
Well, but you do acknowledge and see that obviously the rent roll has been provided, and it is as reported on my page number 14, and those would be the revenues that would be generated, correct?
Yes, but
So, we're taking an income, the city is taking a year-end statement and relying, and I've seen this increasingly this cycle, relying specifically on what's shown as the top line number there. There can be accounting issues that we're unaware of here that impact what and how this is reported. So I'm not saying that is inaccurate necessarily. It's specific to how the building is done. But if you go through lease by lease and look at the calculations as projected, it's not different than what I'm coming out to. So to say that they would achieve, they should be achieving, 30, 50 or whatever the figure is, they're not. And they haven't been able to achieve that since the beginning of the development, which started in 2015 roughly is when they got started on the leasing of the reconfigured, redeveloped site. So that's a considerable amount of time, up to April 1, 2018, in order to lease all of these spaces with very experienced retail agents. Mr. Ken Yee, Michelle Constant, Jonah Levine, excellent agents, do a fantastic job. I can't say enough about them. If they haven't leased the space at $32 now, it's extremely unlikely to happen at that level.
that's all my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stanley, any questions? Yeah, Mr. Smith?
You've got 6 units that are vacant, is that correct?
I didn't count them, but if that's what it is,
There
yes.
they are. Where are they on this map? Where are these, are they all together? Because I'm looking at this here, this piece. I just want to know where the vacancies are.
So if you look at,
Page 10?
I don't have them numbered. I have been there on site, but if I get one wrong, please forgive me. But looking at the bottom of my page number 9 is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
The majority of the vacancies are located in this building at the rear of the
Yeah,
site.
that's what I've assumed.
Yeah, back in here. I believe that they were about to experience a vacancy here, but that's for the future. So this is where you're looking.
And
at
they
the
were all
vacancy.
vacant at the time of the reassessment?
Not every single one. There was 1, maybe 2 units in that rear building on this front corner that had tenancies. not the entire building, but most of it. And I think there may have been one unit in one of these front buildings as well. I just don't recall which. Yes, there was, I just don't remember which
Do
one.
you know
it
when
was.
they were built, that back unit?
The majority of the development was done for 2015. There were buildings on site when it was purchased, but that would have been, I believe, your front building here may have been the only one on site at that time, I think.
What I'm wondering is, were they available for rent at that
Oh,
time?
yes, absolutely, yeah.
And you mentioned that they're not on the main drive. Well, these wouldn't be on the main drive, obviously. Okay. They're all, what, 1,500 square feet? Pretty well.
Yeah, roughly, if you look at page, 1,500 is what they have them at, yeah.
I did have one little question, but I kind of lost it, so that's all I need right now, thank you.
Mr. Smith, if you turn to page 4, I think we all agree that these are the rear buildings.
Yeah.
It looks like there's signage on the back building, there's signage on the first one. There's signage on the third one, and it looks like there's signage on the last one.
So which picture are we looking at?
The bottom one.
The bottom picture?
Yes.
Yes, so where we're standing here, this is Ellis.
Right.
So you're looking from the north to the south,
Right.
into the interior parking area. So Urban Barn is the tenancy on the right there. That's the front building that fronts on Ellis. So as you drive west, what you see is that building, and then you have a brief scan of the parking lot and the Starbucks and perhaps Jollibee as you go this direction. And coming the other direction, the Starbucks and the Jollibee block your view of the back. So yes, if you're standing here, there's signage on those buildings at the back indeed. But it's not something that you see in your normal course of seeing this site from your vehicle.
But I guess part of your evidence was that this back building is mostly vacant.
It is mostly vacant. That's the challenged piece. That corner piece that you're looking at with the sign on it, that's the one that I indicated was tenanted. There was one, maybe 2 units on the front corner of that rear building that had tenants. So I am accurate in that. That is the tenant that we're talking about right there. And it probably says what the tenant name is on my 14 Saw Pizza. You can see from their sign, that's what we're looking at.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay, I have no questions, so is there any summation you wish to do?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. We shall move onwards and upwards to 2539 Main Street. So, you can proceed on 2539 Main.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address 2539 Main Street. Roll number 0500920790. This property originally valued for $2,563,000. Today I am making a recommendation to reduce value to $2,432,000. I would like to distribute my calculation.
Okay.
page number 2, there are tenant lease information in the page number 2. Also rent comparables also in page number 2. I'm not going to talk about the original calculation, but the difference between the original calculation and today's calculation is the rental rate adjustment based on the age of the property, the location. My potential rent reduced 202,562 to 192,411. That's the only change in here for the recommendation. It's solely based on the rental rates. You can see the picture of the property and the location map in page number 7 and 8. And also the rent roll attached. This rent also signage revenue reported sold separately as a line item. My rent represents the signage revenue also. And all the leases are net leases. As my understanding, it's attached. You can see the master rent roll. It has a 2 line items of parking and signage rental. And then it's a net operating income calculated as a 158,960. It's in page number 2 on rent roll. But it has included tenant improvements in there and leasing commission in there, which is we usually don't consider. And based on this information, and also it's reported as a 0% vacancy, but we are giving 4% vacancy as model. Based on this information, I am asking to reduce the value on this property to 2,432,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
Just very briefly, a typical multi-tenant or even single-tenant property will experience vacancy over the life of its operation, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
we are giving 4%.
Those are my only questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brent, any questions?
No questions.
No question.
Any questions? Okay, no questions?
Sorry? Yeah, no, sorry, that's fine.
Okay, and so
Oh, yeah, for the one
are you accepting the reduction?
I do have one further quick question. The cap rate for the property, that's fine, I have no further questions.
Okay. But the recommendation, is that acceptable? I didn't ask that at the start.
No, we're not in agreement with the recommendation.
Then proceed with your presentation.
So looking at the city's revised value, and thank you very much for that. The bulk, there's really 2 points here. The bulk of it being the non-recoverable operating expenses, which we won't discuss further, makes a change to the net operating income. If you look at our page number 17, which summarizes the entire thing, the non-recoverable operating expense is obviously different. We have a total of 7% non-recoverable operating expenses, whereas the city's at 2%. Obviously this makes an impact on the NOI. And finally, we have capitalization rate. If you look at my page number 20, the city has used a very specific cap rate of 7.3% for this cycle. They were at 7.5% in the prior cycle. We have not seen any change that would impact this property. Looking at the cap rate information that we present on page number 16 as well, it's indicative of 7.5% being an appropriate cap rate for a strip center such as this. This particular property, there's photos of it in the front there. The tenancies, as indicated on the top of page number 12, are as they're shown. The TD Bank is a kiosk. It's not a bank. It's just a kiosk where they pay rent to be present for that. The remainder of the tenants are locals. We're not looking at national chains here. So that is the type of property we're looking at. The location of it, I would also point out, if you look at my page number 9, it's at the intersection of Red River Boulevard and Main Street on the south east corner of Main and Red River Boulevard, located to the north of Chief Peguis Trail. So you're getting out towards the edge of the city here. There's not a lot within the city beyond that. Obviously, there is external residences that do drive into the city, but you're less central than some better locations, certainly. So a 7.5% capitalization rate is certainly appropriate, and using that cap rate, we arrive at final market value of $2,178,000. Unless this is one that I also did not correct.
It is the wrong value.
Okay, can we take a pause for a
Okay.
moment?
Okay, a brief pause then.
Do you want me to shut off?
Yeah. All right, we're back, so can you read your final number in again?
Right, so looking at page number 17, our final net operating income comes to $173,571. Capitalized at 7.5% gives us a final market value of $2,314,000.
Okay, now, do you have any questions of Mr. Smith?
Only one question.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, do you aware about the TD Bank rental rates are not included in my recommendation because we are missing in that terms?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, Grant, any questions?
No questions. No questions.
Okay, I have no questions, so we shall move on to our ultimate property, which is 414 Westmont. So you can proceed on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property address 414 West Mount Drive, roll number 060433888000. This property was originally valued to $2,305,000. Today I'm proposing to reduce the value to $1,999,000. I would like to 999,000.
Can you lead us through your recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This recommendation based on the reduce of rental rate. My potential rent was originally $163,575. New potential rent is $152,876. You can see in calculation. That change based on the location. This is a strip mall. This is not the neighborhood shopping center. We classify as a strip mall. Strip mall parameters apply and pre-check the effective age and actual bill and the rents they reported. Then I adjusted the rental rates and overall capitalization rate were increased to 7.5 based on the change I made for the rental rates and effective age. So you can see the pictures and page number 7 and 8. It is kind of not truly a strip mall, look like. It's a property in the and this building was originally built in 1965 and reported as all net rents and also utility and property tax recovered maintenance.
If you could excuse me, I'm not familiar with any of these streets. What area of the city is this in?
I don't know, this is
Just out of curiosity, I don't think it makes
I
any.
think it's in north.
It's Winnipeg. Winnipeg.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm not very familiar either.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I have attached a rent roll as they reported. They reported net rents and we are close to what they are reporting. I'm using model driven rents. Then my new value is $1,999,000. I'm kindly asking reduce the value to $1,999,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, Mr. Smith?
So the valuation changes were a reduction in rent
Yeah,
based on location.
based on the actually the year of the build, effective year build. We aggressively using 1985, but I checked the area and location and the pictures. Yeah, that's the only reason, rent change and the cap rate change.
So the
The,
cap
all
rate
the
was-
model-driven parameters apply.
Okay. So the rent went down because of location and age.
Yeah,
But the cap rate went down correspondingly. Was that a?
cap rate went up actually,
'Cause I-
6.55 to 7.05.
Oh, did it? I'm sorry, let me look at your. No, I see that now. What was the, do you know what the cap rate used on the property in the last cycle was?
No, I can't remember, I did not check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, Mr. Stenning, any questions of the
I
Senate?
have no questions.
I have no questions.
I guess my only question is the precision to which you're ascribing your cap rates again. Seems to be getting pretty fine, and the hair is being split.
Yeah, I know, 0.5 is 1.5. We have those kind of cap rate this year. They very precisely calculated. I cannot explain
Yeah.
further.
Okay, you can, I take it that you're not accepting the 1,999,000.
It's certainly appreciated, but we're not quite in agreement on that.
Okay, so you can proceed then.
If you look at, and location is a critical factor in this particular property. So if you look at my page number 7, unfortunately it's in black and white, but there is a red circle with a black dot in it with 414 Westmount Drive indicated beside it, just to the west of, well, somewhat to the west of Lagimoje Boulevard there and north of number 1 Highway, Fermor. That is where the property is located. It's right smack in a residential area. It's not surrounded by any other commercial of any kind in any close proximity. The commercial in that area is centered on Fermor itself. There is a small node at the corner of Cottonwood and I forget the cross street there, but to the west, the next major interchange from where westbound is to the west on Cottonwood there. This property isn't on Cottonwood, which would be the through street. It's on the corner of Westmount and Patterson, which is strictly a residential intersection. Patterson does not go through from Lagimoje to any of the main transit streets through this Winnipeg neighborhood, so it's right on the corner of a residential parcel essentially. If you look at the photos of it on pages 4, 5, and 6, it's a very straightforward, small little retail / office-y kind of location where they have a number of different clinics. There's a small pharmacy, a small dental clinic, etc. So you're not looking at any national tenancies of any kind in this location. Parking lot needs some work. It is certainly off-center as far as tenants view it, so that obviously drives the rents. The city's brought the rents down. We appreciate that. We're in closer proximity on that. However, looking at cap rate for the subject property, so we were just looking at 2539 Main, a much more attractive property from an investment perspective, we had a cap rate ourselves of 7.5% on that one. The city model-driven cap rate on that was 7.3%, located right on Main Street, just to the south of a grocery-anchored chain. This property is inferior to that. We're using a 7.75% cap rate in our calculation. But the city, and again, it's model driven, so I understand, but the model drives a cap rate of 7.05% for this. It's an inferior property to what we were just discussing. The cap rate certainly wouldn't be lower than the cap rate used on the prior one. In fact, it would be higher, so 7.5, 7.75 is certainly applicable to this. We're higher than our cap rate that we used on the last one at 7.75% for those reasons. And it gives you a final market value of $1,611,000. If you were to cap the city's revised NOI at 7.5%, it would bring it to $1,879,000. That is my presentation.
Questions?
I don't have questions, thank you.
Ron, any questions?
Last figure you said 1,875,000,
879.
and what were you doing to get that?
If you were to capitalize the city's revised NOI,
The 14903?
Yeah,
Okay.
at 7.5%, it would give you $1,879,000.
Oh, I see. Okay,
So that's closer to where we're at.
yeah.
Can I
But
ask a
again-
question now?
If
Yeah.
we raise it, yeah.
That means, Mrs. Smith, you are revising your actual,
I'm not revising I was just pointing that out.
Oh, okay.
The main gap again is the non-recoverable income issue and cap rate for this. We have a gap on income as well, but that non-recoverable needs to be decided and addressed. And it certainly impacts these values significantly. So while it may look like we're offside, it's not. It's a case of the gulf between the two being larger than it should be.
Okay, Brent, any?
I have a question.
I have no questions. So, thank you very much then.
Thank you very much.
That concludes today's hearing. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can.